Cloud. All right. And away we go.
All right, all right. Well, what's going on, everybody? My name is Lawrence. I'm here with Taylor. What's going on, Taylor?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching. You're probably watching this on YouTube. We're glad to be sharing this information with you, and we hope to be seeing you IRL pretty soon.
Yeah, so my name is Lawrence Gray, and I am the executive director of Young Producers Group. We teach music production and technology in K through 12 schools around the country. We're based in Los Angeles, so we do in-person programs throughout LAUSD and in some private schools here as well. I have been teaching music production and technology for almost 10 years now, and I've spent a lot of time in classrooms, a lot of time coaching teachers, folks who work for YPG. And I think I've really landed on some things that create a good music production oriented classroom. And yeah, I'm going to get into some of that stuff today. But before we jump to my slides, Taylor, do you want to introduce yourself a little more fully?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Taylor. I've been at Soundtrap for a little while now. Before that, I was in the classroom teaching percussion, running a drum line and doing the land of band here in Texas, first in the Dallas area, then here in Austin. And then I started teaching production and kind of fell in love with the creative music education with production and creativity at the center of it. And then that's kind of how I got connected with Soundtrap and Lawrence back in the day, and then reconnected recently. And I just really appreciate what Lawrence has been doing in music production and music education broadly, and what you're doing in LA and all around the country now, expanding. So I'm happy to be here with you, Lawrence, and glad that we're sharing this and hopefully supporting and helping grow our music production and creative music education community.
Speaking of community, we are joined today by Jillian Damaris, our rock star attendee here. I'm happy to have you here, Jillian. So let's jump in. I'm gonna share my screen and we'll take a look at what I have prepared for you guys today. All right, so as we see here, I'm gonna be talking about essential music production pedagogy, right? Things that you got to know if you are going to be running a class where you have kids making original music. I think that for me is the biggest difference when we're talking about Soundtrap or Ableton or whatever in the classroom is folks are performing and producing original work. And there has to be a different approach when you are getting into that stuff and you're asking kids to put themselves out there and make their own stuff. This little GIF that we're seeing here, this is actually the two of my students performing at LACHSA, the LA County High School for the Arts. This was our music tech showcase in 2019. So as you can see here, guys, my email is lawrence@youngproducersgroup.com. And there's tons of information about the program at youngproducersgroup.com. So let's jump in. We're going to get started by talking about what I see as the key principles of running a effective music production class. Really, the number one thing, if you can take anything away from what I'm talking about here today, the most important thing for you to do as a teacher is structure a creative community. A great teacher who is very well qualified is helpful, but somebody who can facilitate students engaging with each other and playing off of each other and being inspired by each other, that's the most important thing that you can have. And really, a supportive class culture is paramount to achieving that. Now, we already talked about this a bit, that centering students' voices and cultures through composition is really it's a great responsibility, right? You have to create a safe space in order for something like that to happen. Students have to know that you've got their back and that you are going to be supporting them and that their peers are going to be engaging with them on that. And with that, folks have to feel like they have a space to be themselves. So if you say for a project, we're going to talk all about sort of what goes into a great project. But if you say, okay, it has to be this style at this tempo, at this length, blah, 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 that pigeonholes folks into a specific thing, and it might not be resonant with them. So I think really setting something up where folks can be themselves and know that they're going to be respected is essential. I think part of the beauty here of the one of the only real silver linings of this COVID music world is that folks are teaching music production, and I think a lot of band teachers are jumping in, thinking, all right, I'm just going to kind of do my band thing and make it happen here in music technology and music production. But we know that it's a different thing. You can't just be the sage on stage. You really got to kind of get out of the way and let students make their own work and let the curriculum guide you. And to that point, individual work time is really, really important. Giving students time to adequately work through their projects and make stuff happen is really critical. And when they do that, teachable moments always arise that are super valuable. Another thing, especially having done a lot of professional development with teachers around the country, I'm always a little surprised where folks don't necessarily realize how important good sound and like decent headphones and all that goes into actually fostering engagement in the classroom. If you don't have a decent pair of speakers, it's not satisfying after students have made a project to play something. So that's really an essential piece of it. You don't need anything fancy at all, but having just some baseline quality of sound and headphones is a really big thing. Grades are also very different when you're doing this kind of thing, right? For us, when it's a composition-based thing, it's really, for me, more a question of how students are engaging with the projects and their general sorts of participation, right? We're not going to give somebody a B instead of an A because their baseline wasn't great. It's really more a question of, do they understand sort of the function of a baseline and how that all goes? We'll also talk about this a lot, but in my eyes, studying music production is 100% about music, but also it's much more about students growing as human beings and developing, their leadership and media literacy. So these are really the key principles that are going to ground my discussion today. And I would ask that you guys try to keep this stuff in mind as you're doing your thing. If at any point, the folks that are on the Zoom here want to ask a question, please feel free to unmute yourself and prod. I'm happy to stop at any point. So cool.
Welcome to Aaron. Hey, Aaron, glad you joined us.
Yeah, man. So I'm going to go to my next slide. And, basically, folks, there are instructional techniques that I coach my instructors on every single time, right? We all know that each student is different, each class is different, each school is different. So it's going to look a little bit different when the boots are actually on the ground. But the essence here is really the same. And again, after doing this stuff for a decade, right, being in schools, I've really landed on what works when you're trying to do this stuff in the classroom. So let's take a look at the YPG key instructional techniques. They're pretty simple, but I think it's really important to kind of highlight what's going on here. So this is a big one. This first one, there's a fine line between creativity and control. If you run a really strict class, right, where students have to be super quiet every step of the way and the sort of tight ship of a good band, that level of strictness can hamper creativity. At the same time, if it's too loosey-goosey and kids feel like they can do whatever they want, it's not going to work. So again, this is a unique thing for each teacher, but I think in order to maintain a creative atmosphere where folks can express themselves, it can't be too strict. But if it's too loose, it's not going to work. So you're going to have to figure out what that right balance is for you. But this is something that I think is a really, really critical thing for teachers to be thinking about in the classroom. This next one is also a huge one. Be yourself. it's crazy to me how there are these expectations of what a teacher is supposed to be and what a student is supposed to be, instead of actually thinking about who are the human beings that are in the classroom with each other. And the more that we can bring our authentic selves to the classroom, the richer the environment will be and the richer the creative community will be. So as scary as it can be for some folks to actually put themselves out there and be who they authentically are with their students, in my eyes, that's really step one to having a really effective class. And I think with that is sort of the thing that's below that is this idea of enthusiasm is contagious, right? Jillian is like the queen of this, right? She's always super pumped, and I think students feel that, and it has to be an authentic enthusiasm, and that's part of what I think being yourself in the classroom is about, is not shying away from the things that you're actually excited about, and bringing those things that make you the musician and you the artist that you are into the discussion. Because if you're enthusiastic and you're excited, that's going to signal to students not only that this is a cool subject, but it's okay for them to be excited and for them to be enthusiastic. This next piece here is writing down everything, basically. I think there's, at least in Los Angeles where we're based, there's a ton of English as a second language students in our classes. And there's a lot of really crazy words that even native English speakers don't know. And when we're dealing with super technical things, it's very helpful to have those steps written down clearly that folks can refer to as they're working on their projects. Just a few more on the next page. Keep lessons simple. This is something, guys, that I really have to coach my instructors on a lot. This idea here of presenting things as discrete packets of information, right? Taylor, is a very experienced producer, a very experienced percussionist. It's very easy once you start talking about subdividing to be like, oh, let's take a look at, triplets and all these cool things that you can do with triplets. Isn't this amazing? And then all of a sudden you're talking about something else when, as students are building their structures of knowledge, they need these things brick by brick. So I think really as much as you can, keep it simple. Only present one thing at a time. That doesn't mean you can't present two things in one day, but do it discreetly. It's a really, really critical thing. And this last piece here is something that I really believe in. Just expressing to your students that you care how they're doing and what's going on in their lives signals, again, that this is a creative community that is important and that we're connecting as human beings. I think through COVID, it's really insane, some of the things that kids are dealing with, and expressing to students, hey, you can come talk to me about what's going on in your life. They're gonna take you up on it, right? And I've had some kids bring stuff to me that are pretty gnarly, but in my eyes, this is really where the rubber meets the road. And when you express to students, hey, I'm here for you, that signals a lot more than just, you can come talk to me. So these are sort of, again, the key instructional techniques that I train every YPG teacher on, and I think it's a valuable thing for folks to be keeping in mind. Okay, now let's get into a little bit more of the specifics, starting with the importance of a creative community. So, I said this at the top, I really do believe that the creative community is the most important thing for a music production and composition teacher to foster, because, you don't need to really know what you're talking about with music production. You don't really need to know what you're talking about, with the highly technical things. But you really do need to be a great leader when it comes to fostering trust, right? So this first idea here, creative communities are built on trust. Teachers have to trust that their students are going to meaningfully engage with the projects and participate in the group discussions, right? The listening parties that we're going to talk about next. And students have to trust that their teachers are looking out for them and that their peers are going to be respectful. So yeah, none of this is possible without a good class culture. You know, Young Producers Group works with some pretty rough schools throughout LA where the school culture itself is really tough. And working through that and creating a class culture independent of a not stellar school culture is a real battle. But I think sometimes it might take months. It literally might take almost an entire year to do that, showing up consistently giving that consistency to students is really important. And this kind of again gets back to this creativity versus control. Students have to know that they're going to be held accountable, right? They can't just show up late. There has to be a air of respect for you as the teacher, and you have to treat them with respect. So that's really huge. And this idea again here of bringing your full self to the classroom, right? Obviously, we can't be 100% ourselves. You can't talk about everything going on in your life, and students the same. But I think we want to get right up to we want to obviously keep it appropriate, of course. But I think the more we can really be our full selves, the better we'll be able to create these communities. Cool. Now, another part here of fostering a good creative community and being a good teacher in this kind of context is having a good curriculum and having great projects. I have spent years developing the Young Producers Group curricula and thinking a lot about what goes into a good project. And in my eyes, a great project should be really simple and should leave space for folks to do the things that are authentic to them while keeping it grounded in a specific topic. If you keep that going and there's space for folks to be themselves, that's essential. And then from here, I believe that the work the students turn in with their projects is really the best way to assess, hey, are these folks really learning? I do think assessments are important so folks can answer questions about what they've learned, especially when we talk about really technical things. It's helpful to really prod that knowledge, but the proof is in the pudding, and the pudding is the projects, So here are some examples from some of our different curricula. In our arranging a song key concept, we have an assignment called Freeform. And this is after folks have made a song in the typical A-B-C-B pop song structure. So once they've done that, then it says write a full song that follows any form of your choice, but they have to write down what that form is, right? So that can be anything, whatever speaks to that student, but it's clearly rooted in form. And the same thing here with our sampling project for Ableton, right? Write a piece of music that exclusively makes use of samples. Where that goes is literally infinite, but no synthesizers allowed, right? So that it forces folks to put the sampling knowledge into practice. Cool. And then, in our music appreciation add-on that we have this artist analysis project, which is actually several parts. And each student picks an artist and they analyze their music, their message, and their place in culture, eventually presenting that analysis in Google Slides. Whichever artist they want, totally up to them. But again, it's wide open and hyper-specific at the same time. Cool. Any questions or comments from folks thus far?
I have some comments, which is thank you, Lawrence, for all of this great stuff, dude. I literally, I've got notes here. I'll read my notes out later. But yeah, thanks for sharing all this.
This is the sauce, guys. This is the
sauce.
This is really what makes a Young Producers Group class really tick. And I think this is really
the master chef. And
this is what folks can this is what folks can do in any class. This is how we provide professional development. And we see it work all over the place. So I'm gonna keep
the thing I think is so important, and then I've learned in my teaching, is the power of community, because it's to think that you could do it all yourself is silly, right? Like there's so many forces and so many things happening when you have a whole community of people working at something together. Like you're learning from your classmates, you're learning from everybody, you're sharing with your classmates, you're sharing with your family, you're doing all these things. When you're actually really treating it like that, that I think is realistically how, where the, if you don't do that, if you ignore that, then you won't be able to do as much on your own, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And at the end of the day, we're a different generation, right? Even if you're a young, hip teacher and they think you're cool, you're still closer to their parents
Oh,
than
yeah,
you are to you, and they're much more likely to engage when there is a social underpinning to what's
totally,
going on. When they
totally.
feel that this is a not just they're not doing it for you,
Uh-huh.
right? They're doing it for themselves
Yeah.
and for each other. That's
So for the way
that's
that
everything.
it was in my experience, and I still remember, is like, so like building a percussion program of, from 6th grade through 12th grade and trying to have it be good. Like you want people practicing, you want it to be cool to practice. And
Yep.
when you went to the schools and you saw people like practicing and it was cool to be good and people wanted to be, you had a culture of excellence, or not excellence, but I think you know what I'm saying. Like,
Dedication, totally.
so and
So
that comes from the community and the culture that you cultivate.
yep, 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 yep. So Jillian just asked a great question. She says, striking the balance between providing too much and too little criteria is difficult when
Mm.
project lesson planning. Any thoughts on this? Yeah. So Jillian, I think this is a really good point. I make a conscious choice to not have length requirements.
Mm.
Every once in a while, I will say, okay, this has to be at least 2 minutes long, no longer than five, sometimes. But this is again where I think having that authentic human connection with your students matters, right? Because kids know what they're doing. If a kid turns in a 10-second project and it says, all right, miss, here you go, that person knows what they're doing, right? That's like, and if you've developed a relationship with this person to where you can say, hey, do you think this is enough? Then you're actually having a conversation, right? It's and because I think on the other hand too, right? If we want to think about a how someone can really authentically engage with a project, it might be that somebody thinks on a really micro level and they're going to make the most engrossing, amazing 25 seconds you've ever heard, right? As opposed to, 2 minutes and 50 seconds of kind of just bleh. So I think the idea here, and we'll talk about this in the next piece on how we see project based learning, is you don't just give the project and then say, all right, I'll see you guys when it's done, right? Every class starts with a lecture on whatever topic you're getting into, and then work time, right? Work time, work time, work time. And you can cruise around and look over students' shoulders and listen to where they're at and engage with them like that, right? So it's generally pretty easy to tell who's, you know, authentically engaging with the project or not. So I recognize, Jillian, that's a little bit of a dodge of your question, because I don't think the more rules you give, the more false structure you're actually providing. I think if you can keep it super open in terms
Mhm.
of what folks are allowed to do, but very specific in the topics you want them to be exploring, that's going to lead you down the right path. So I hope that's answering your question, Jillian. Um, let's While we're on the topic of projects, let's take a look at my so we've got this project here, right? So let's keep going and get into the listening parties. Um, John, did I get that okay? Do you, any additional questions there? All right, moving on. So the listening parties, folks, this, in my eyes, is the most difficult part of running a great class around music production and technology. But this is where the magic really happens. This is where that creative community is actually solidified. If you don't have a listening party where students are stepping up and sharing what they've made with the group, not just you, but with the whole group, a creative community cannot form. It's all theoretical otherwise. Students have to make themselves vulnerable. I mean, that's what being an artist is. And when they have that community of folks who are also equally making themselves vulnerable, and they see people shining, and they're inspired, and they're motivated, that's it. And again, it's not going to always be easy, and it's not going to always be good, right? Some of our classes, like I was talking about, when you're in a school where there isn't a lot of trust for teachers, right? And there isn't a lot of trust between students. Sometimes it's not that easy to get students to then, after somebody plays a song, to make a comment. But really clearly establishing the guidelines that we're going to talk about here, that's where, and doing it consistently every time, is how you really get it going. So yes, basically, folks, what we do here in a listening party is everybody turns in what they've made, whether that's on Google Classroom or just on their own computers, whatever. There's a day, everybody knows, all right, listening party is happening on this day. I got to have my project ready to share. Basically, folks, we can see these are the expectations. And this has to be made perfectly clear at the start, before anything even happens, is a listening party is a safe space, right? No one's going to make fun of anybody. And, this kind of gets back again to this idea of creativity versus control. Like, we're having a good time, the music is playing, blah, blah, blah. But like the moment, if there is a moment, but the moment that I get a whiff of any kind of disrespect or rudeness, I come down like a hammer, right? I think it keeps students on their toes, right? Because if you're just like Mr. Cool Teacher all the time, then they won't take you seriously. But if you take it serious that, hey, we respect each other in here, we're respecting our artists as we're growing, then they know, oh, okay, he's not playing on that, right? And they're going to take you seriously on that. So yeah, respect, right? And all criticism being constructive and supportive. I believe constructive criticism is an act of love, an act of friendship. If you're just telling everybody, hey, your tracks are great, cool, well done, everything's perfect, then that's not authentically engaging with the other person, right? So instead of saying, something like, hey, your bass line is terrible, right? Because that's not a very constructive thing. It also, doing this forces students to actually use terms. So, you could say your bass line was conflicting with your kick drum because they're both in the same part of the frequency spectrum, right? Like that's another way of saying your bass is terrible, but it's in a way that's much more constructive and moving forward, always positive, forward looking. And this is something too, folks, that I've really seen a lot of over the last several years of teaching. I'm not sure what the source of this is, but there's even at, say, like a LACSA, right, LA County High School for the Arts, participating in discourse, having a discussion about what's working and what's not working in a piece of music, not just saying, is it good, is it bad, A, B, C, or D, having meaningful creative discourse where students are asking questions, participating, right, like in a discussion, those skills are not as reinforced as they often were in the past. So developing the ability to participate in discourse and have a discussion around the merits of each other's work is really, really valuable. And that starts, I think, with you modeling that. So I always ask the same two questions. What was working in the piece, and where is there room for improvement? You'll notice, guys, that we're never, ever going to have something as being good or something as being bad. That's not the point here. I suggest you guys check out Liz Lerman's critical response process. It's a really interesting, you know, model for critique, and really this idea of statements of meaning come from her, right? So you could say, I found this bass line to be, you know, really exciting, or I found the, you know, kick drum and bass frequencies to be conflicting, not like your kick drum and bass are bad, right? Or this is good, having there be descriptions of what is working and what is not. Let's keep moving here. I'm going to go to my next slide on listening parties. Yeah, inspiration instead of intimidation, right? I think when you notice a kid is really killing it, when you see a student who clearly put a lot of energy and a lot of themselves into their piece, I think it's awesome to really pump them up and really gas them up and say, wow, this project was really incredible. I can really tell, you know, how much energy you put into this. I see how much growth you've demonstrated here. You know, you should be really proud of yourself. And students see, okay, you know, kind of what Taylor was saying before, right? Like, if I really put myself into this, I can get some of that love, right? And I can get that support from the community. That I find to be a much better motivator than, you know, any sort of intimidation or trying to rule with an iron fist, right? So this again kind of gets into that creativity versus control. Positivity is always going to be a better motivator in an art class than negativity and saying what people can't do. So, you know, this next piece here, the what do you do if your class is really big, is an important thing, and there isn't one simple answer here, but there's a variety of strategies that you can put into effect, that can still, you know, make space for everybody. There's ways to do it. You know, I've talked about a few right here. You know, you'll have to figure out what the right solution is, because again, each student, each class, each school is different. And then this gets back to what I was talking about before. Good sound, guys. Every single time when I'm doing professional development, we're talking about, you know, the power of a listening party, but, you know, you can't get kids really excited if you've got just dinky little laptop speakers, that have no bass. We often recommend schools to buy these JBLs. They are solid 8-inch speakers that can really move some air. And for $220 each, it's, you know, not cheap, but they're great. It's an absolutely worthy engagement. JBL also makes a 6-inch speaker that is cheaper, and still really, really good. And you're going to need an audio interface to connect that to your computer. So the Scarlett 2i2 is, you know, very, very widely sold. It's great. So, guys, again, I really can't stress enough how valuable listening parties are, but it's got to be done right, right? Otherwise, it can be a bit of a, it can go south. So you got to be careful in establishing those expectations and really holding them to it. I've got just a few more slides here, because I know Taylor's got some great stuff to share. So I'm gonna move on to my next piece here. And this gets back to what I was talking before, that teaching music, and especially music production and composition, is 100% about music and 0% about music. Social emotional learning and media literacy development really are, you know, central to my pedagogy and to what I push students to be doing with what they're, you know, the projects that they're making. It's amazing what you can sneak in when you've got thick bass slapping around the classroom, right? If you have 808s going on, um, you know, folks oftentimes won't realize that they're learning about operating systems and they're learning about, you know, how to respect each other and blah 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 blah, right? Having culturally relevant, personally significant elements in the mix makes it where you're on their terms, right? You are in their world, and yeah, oftentimes they don't even realize that they've been Trojan horsed and are you know growing social emotionally, but also with their use of computers. Um, so again, listening parties, making original music, collaborating, and performances are all incredibly rich social emotional learning opportunities. And then, you know, music technology shouldn't be a big surprise that that's a great way to develop media literacy, you know, but learning how to use Soundtrap, learning how to use Ableton, these are things that are going to make students much better at any sort of complex digital system and anything that requires stepwise, you know, these kind of tasks that is process oriented tasks that are such a central part of programming or any sort of editing. Cool. That's about it for what I wanted to present here today. Again, my email is lawrence@youngproducersgroup.com. You can find us on Instagram and you know youngproducersgroup.com as well. Before I turn it over to Taylor, Jillian, Aaron, do you homies have any questions about anything that I've presented? All right. Well, I will turn it over. Oh, bing, bing, bing. Oh, thank you, Jillian. It was an awesome conversation. I'm going to stop my share and turn it back over to my man, Taylor.
All right. Thanks, Lawrence. As I pull up my screen, I want to just sort of reflect on what you've shared so far. So thank you, man. And I literally, I have like a couple pages of notes. I feel like this is straight up a masterclass. And I wrote down creative community and supportive class culture. I also agree. And that's actually kind of, I'm going to sort of give like a higher level view of some of the same things. You were so detailed and so great. You talked about getting out of the way and how important individual work time is, which I think is really different than the culture of an ensemble where it's like rehearsal time is of utmost importance, right? And it's like rehearsal. It's just different when you're in a music lab, you know? Teachable moments always arise. I found the same thing when because I transitioned from teaching a drumline, the most possible regimented thing that there is, you know, arguably. To going to teaching music production and creativity and songwriting and, you know, and I was able to embrace the chaos, but it's because there is definitely some chaos and comparatively there's an orders of magnitude more chaos than a drumline. But it's still, if you can accept that chaos, still somehow beautiful teaching moments happen. They kind of, there's like, it's like, it's I don't know, it's like bubbling up. And then of course, like eventually you'll find them and eventually those moments will happen.
Well, guess what? Real life is chaotic, right?
Yeah.
You know, like the music industry is chaotic. Any sort of creative, anything chaotic. Has a decent amount of chaos in it.
Which is a segue into it's a hint into my final example here that I'm going to show you. It's really cool. I actually wish I could talk about chaos the whole time. I'll save it for the end and I'll let everybody check it out at the end. It's very cool. You need to know about it. But anyways, and then the last thing I wrote down, or a couple things, is that your passion gives students license to get excited. I love that. I love that when you said that. And how creative communities are built on trusts and how important listening parties are. I'm right there with you. I think it's incredible what can happen at a listening party. And I've been experiencing them in the last couple of weeks in a couple of ways, and they're really fun. Like listening parties are like really powerful. And I totally resonated with what you said when you were talking about each person has to make themselves feel vulnerable in that, and they are, but in that you create an opportunity, and like a really awesome one. Like that's kind of the point, is like listening parties, like you said, they're really important to do them right. Because it's sort of like anything that the power of, you should do it right, because you don't want to waste that opportunity. And I think listening parties are a big opportunity.
Again, it's a respect thing, right? Like if you ask students to put themselves out there, but you're not willing to catch them if they fall, or separate them if it's not, you have to be super careful about it, because it's sensitive, right? It's delicate. It's like, it's for the band leader, or the choral teacher, orchestra. It's like the solo. It's like a person doing a solo, and you're not just going to have them go up with no prep and no support. There has to be scaffolding.
Totally. Well, so all of that to say, I really love what you're saying. I almost just want to be like, all right, cut. I don't need to add anything else. But I will. I'll go through this quickly, and hopefully it's useful to somebody. And because I think there's a couple things that I really agree with you on, and have kind of similar experiences of how important the creative community is, I think. And so in my mind, what I was kind of prepared to talk about was not particularly on listening parties. It was like including listening parties, but also including just a general aspect of publishing and sharing. So you gave the PhD version of this, and I'm going to give the 7-minute 5-year-old version of it. So just like a little thing to kick it off is like, if you don't hear the song, you're kind of missing a whole point, like a whole cycle. Like music is meant to be in multi directions. Music is not like a one way. I mean, there's many ways music can be, but I think you'll see what I mean. That if we start at the top, and you start and you're inspired and you're excited and you make something and you're making music, and then maybe you're collaborating and bringing other people in and making more music. And then you have this moment where you share. In your case, it's the listening parties. That's a way to share. Another way to share is, getting it onto Bandcamp or onto Spotify or YouTube. But I think that listening parties are kind of sometimes a more powerful way of doing the fact that you get people together. There's something special about having people live that is special. So some way of sharing. And then when you do that, like you say, if it goes right, you get such great positive feedback. It feels so affirming to hear people hear you and listen to your work and to your music. It's so powerful. And I'm thinking about, a few weeks ago when I shared a song in this group at a little listening party, and just how great I felt after that, and how much it put energy into my next couple of days of working on music. I was like, yeah, man, from that experience, I just felt so good, and it kept me going. And then I made another thing and I was inspired. And then like, it keeps that going. And that's great. And that's like living my best musical life. That's kind of like the highlight right there. But if you don't do that, what sometimes happens is you make something, or you perform something, or you do whatever, maybe it's in band, maybe it's in music production class, but somehow after the thing has been made and it gets presented, and it just gets maybe presented to a judge or to a teacher and just gets a grade, and there's no listening party, there's no publication, there's no sharing. Maybe not even your best friend in your class hears it. Maybe not even the person that you don't know in your class hears it. Maybe your parents don't hear it. Maybe nobody hears your song. And the only feedback you got is like, this could be better. This is good. This could be better. Blah, blah, blah. Like that sucks. That sucks. And it makes you want to give up. And it makes you want to quit. So there's my animated, recounting of this, because I think I felt both things, and I think I've done both things as a teacher, which is, it's painful to see when you're like, oh no, the first thing I did was criticize, or the first thing I did was point out something, and I didn't make space for the celebration and for the listening party, basically.
The hard part, man, is if it's all just gushing positive praise, then it's not. It gives you a little bit of a sugar high, right? Where you'll have it for the next few days, maybe. Yeah. But it doesn't shore up the meaningful engagement over the long term.
Yeah.
Right. So I think this is where that balance of gassing folks up and really, really, having that praise, but also keeping it grounded in things that folks can be improving on, and seeing that not as a deficiency, not as a negative thing, but as an element of growth, an element of engaging more deeply with your practice. So that's the balance, right? And I think you can see it in a lot of different places. Like I keep referring to Loxa. That's the one school that I still teach at. And these are kids who have been told their entire lives that they're geniuses, that they're, wizard prodigies, which they are. But sometimes they make mistakes and they do things that need to be, improved on. And I can see it like, like there can be misfires, and helping people see criticism as a constructive thing is a process.
Yeah. I'm jumping ahead, but I totally hear you, because I think basically what we're talking about is the balance, where we're kind of explaining the extremes, right? So what I was just trying to illustrate here is like playing for an empty room sucks. It's not as fun as playing for a full room, and it's not as fun as, and it doesn't have to be a packed crowd. It doesn't mean that bigger is better, but the fact is, like, I think it's important to have a place to share music with people live. So I had a bunch of examples to show. I don't know. I think we're basically at time. So what I think would be more appropriate is I'm going to give the highest level. I'm going to run through these in like 10 seconds each or something. And I'm going to put these slides, which all have links built into them. I'm going to put that into the description of this YouTube video. So if you can go and check out what I'm talking about, you can listen to what I'm saying. But these are just a couple examples. Although, Lawrence, I would love if you could do the same. Is there some place or some document of YPG student work? Because I imagine that it's somewhere, and I imagine that it's great.
Tons of it.
There's a lot of great work here, but I know that the work that y'all do is great. So I would love for you to share that as well.
Certainly.
Cool. So John Lever, shout out to John Lever, this guy paved the way, the first person to get in on this Soundtrap Anthem project. If you haven't heard about the Anthem, it's a virtual ensemble project we're doing. We got about a week left, 2 weeks left. May 16th is the deadline. And we've got some submissions coming in from all around the world. And on the 26th, May 26th, we're going to have a live event with our whole Soundtrap team and our whole community. Everybody is welcome. We're going to celebrate the end of the year. Wow. This is kind of a listening party for the Anthem and a listening party for just our whole community at the end of this year. So please check out the Facebook group. Look for something coming. May 26th is actually, I hadn't called it that yet, but now listening party for the Anthem. That's going down the 26th. It's beautiful. It's a project close to my heart, so I'd love for you to check it out and be there. This is just an example of a simple way of doing. You take your students' projects and then you can publish them to Bandcamp. I think this was done by Sarah Manette and her students when that was kind of the only option. You couldn't get together in a room. So this is a great free solution. Bandcamp is a free solution. I think has an advantage over SoundCloud because SoundCloud can get a little messy with certain things and comments and all that. So it's a cleaner platform to send people to. So Bandcamp, super simple way of publishing your stuff if that's, the only way of doing it, or hopefully in companionship or along with a listening party. Mm-hmm. OCDSB, they have done a similar thing, but have published to Spotify. And so props to them. They've taken a little bit step further, which is really not that hard to do. DistroKid.com. That's how you can publish to Spotify. It's $20 for the year, and you can publish to Spotify and Apple Music and all the other things, if that fits in with the ethos of your class. Songwriting camps are really cool. This is an example of somebody in our community that did this songwriting camp. I highly encourage you to check this link, read through the story. There's so much good stuff happening all around. It's almost hard to keep up with it, but this song is a really beautiful song. I'm sorry we can't listen to the whole thing, but check out this link. Check out the songwriting camp that they did. And this is what I was teasing at the beginning, Lawrence. You should check this out if you haven't seen it yet. There's this thing called SongCamp that I've been involved with and I've been kind of watching and really admiring. And the premise of this is an example of kind of, SongCamp is a creative community doing songwriting projects in really interesting creative ways. And it's not just musicians, they're organizing musicians and visual artists and engineers and people in operations, like a lot of really cool things that I think I'm learning from. And I think it would be really cool if the rest of the music education community, whatever that means, kind of took note of some interesting ways of organizing people and writing songs. And yeah, so that is something cool to check out. If you click this little bird, it'll take you to their Twitter for that thing. And then I've got even more examples on here, but I would love for you, Lawrence, to share some examples of YPG student work. And then maybe I'll pass it back to you to take us home and tell us about the next step and how we're going to do an AMA. We would love to kind of collect some questions and hear what everybody is interested in.
Yeah. Well, Taylor, thank you, man. That was awesome to be able to see some of the highlights from around the world, folks doing interesting stuff with music production in Soundtrap. And I want to further highlight the Anthem. We have several of our classes participating. It is super, super cool and great to hear that listening party is happening on the 26th. We'll definitely be there. We're glad to be having this session with you guys today. Clearly, it's difficult for folks to be able to make webinars in the middle of the week. So what we're going to be doing is opening up for the next one, which is May 16th. Is that what we set as the date, Taylor?
I got to double check my facts. Let me do a fact check on that. We'll put it in the description.
We've got an Ask Me Anything that we're doing, where essentially, folks, this is anything you guys want to know about using Soundtrap, about teaching Soundtrap, about anything music production, music technology in the classroom related. This is the form where we're going to be collecting these questions. So we have 3 weeks to collect this stuff.
18th.
And 18th. Okay, May 18th. So we'll be collecting these questions, and we'll also, be hosting another Zoom webinar. So, please feel free to ask any questions. It could be something from what you saw here today, or something else that's been on your mind. We will then go through those things piece by piece and make sure that folks, their questions are being, adequately answered. So we're excited to keep working with you guys, excited to keep, developing the pedagogy here, in classrooms across the country. And it's been an honor to be here with you guys today. Taylor, thank you so much for inviting me to do this. And Jillian, you're a rock star. Aaron, pleasure to meet you, man. And for all the folks that are watching this recording, I'm Lawrence Gray, Executive Director of Young Producers Group, and proud partner here with Soundtrap as they're, changing the game when it comes to music education in schools.
It's a team sport. And I'm glad to be on your team, Lawrence. It's a good team to be on. Thank you for being here. Thank you for everything that you do with YPG. You've been doing this for a while, man. You've had the vision for a long time, at least since 2014, right? Probably earlier.
I started doing this in 2013, but it actually became a proper company in 2016.
Okay. You've been at it.
But yeah, long time, man.
It shows, and I'm really grateful for you and your work. I'm grateful for everybody, Jillian and Aaron, for being here, and everyone else for watching. I saw quite a few friends that looks like they're going to be checking this out, and I'm looking forward to May 18th for our AMA, and then the following week, May 26th, for the Soundtrap Anthem listening party and end of year Heart to Heart, our celebration. And I think that's it. Thanks, everyone.
All right, folks. Yeah, thank you for being here.
Check the description for all the links and things.
Perfect.
Bye.
Bye, guys.